Imagine waking up feeling completely yourself, not the version of you that puts on a bright smile and powers through conversations you don't really want to have, but the you that's still tucked away, quiet and thoughtful, waiting for a moment that feels safe. You've probably been told more times than you can count that the world belongs to those who speak up, those who project their voices, those who somehow manage to command attention without even trying. But here's the paradox. If everyone is busy shouting, who's really listening? And more importantly, who's noticing the quiet genius in the room who doesn't feel the need to perform? Picture this. You're in a meeting, or maybe a classroom, and someone speaks loudly with sweeping hand gestures and a quick laugh that fills the space. Heads turn, notes get scribbled, the energy shifts. It looks like leadership, it sounds like confidence, and it feels like authority. But deep down, you know that sometimes volume is just volume. You probably won't know this unless you've studied the research, but people consistently mistake loudness for competence. It's like society gave out invisible megaphones and decided whoever uses theirs the most must be right. Before you settle in, feel free to like the video if it brought you a little peace, and if you'd like to join us again, we'd love to have you back. Let's slowly drift into tonight's quiet moments together. Now let's slip further into this thought, the loudness premium. That almost unfair little currency that circulates in every hallway, office, classroom, and family dinner table. You see it most clearly when you're young. Teachers call on the kids with their hands raised the highest, and often those kids aren't the ones with the best answers. They're the ones unafraid of being wrong in public. And because they're willing to perform their thinking out loud, they start collecting tiny badges of approval. Praise, attention, extra credit. Over time, those badges add up into a belief: extroversion equals leadership. But think about what that belief does to you if you're not wired that way. You might sit there with ideas simmering, more developed, more nuanced, but by the time you've fully formed your thought, the moment has passed. The conversation has moved on, hijacked by the loudest voice in the room. It's not that you don't have brilliance, it's that brilliance doesn't always arrive on the same timetable as quick banter, and yet society keeps rewarding speed over depth. You notice this at work too. The person who talks the most in meetings often gets seen as the driver of the project, even if half of what they say is recycled air. Meanwhile, the quiet contributor who sends a sharp, well-thought-out memo afterward doesn't always get the same spotlight. It's as though the currency of visibility is worth more than the currency of substance. And that's where the glorification of extroverts quietly takes root, not in facts, but in optics. Now let's add a bit of humor here, because honestly, if volume automatically equaled wisdom, your neighbor's leaf blower would be a Nobel Prize contender. But you already know that's not how it works. The trouble is, in human interaction, our brains get tricked. Loudness signals confidence. Confidence gets confused with competence. And competence, real competence, often takes a quieter form that doesn't sparkle under fluorescent lights. So you find yourself watching this play out again and again. The person who interrupts gets remembered. The person who pauses gets overlooked. And over time, this builds into a kind of silent injustice. Not the loud, protest-worthy kind, but the subtle, everyday bias that shapes who gets promoted, who gets invited, who gets believed. It's not a conspiracy, it's conditioning. Society has trained itself to equate loud with leader, and the cost is that introverts often get written into the margins. That's the strange part, isn't it? Because when you peel back the layers, leadership isn't about volume at all. It's about vision, empathy, and clarity. But in the day-to-day shuffle of human behavior, those qualities get drowned out by charisma. You can probably think of a time when someone dominated a group discussion and everyone nodded along, even though you sat there, quietly aware that their idea had more holes than Swiss cheese. You knew it, but saying it aloud would have made you difficult or negative, so you kept it to yourself. And that silence, multiplied across millions of situations, is how introverted wisdom stays hidden. The loudness premium is sneaky too, because it extends beyond just speaking volume. It stretches into body language, energy, even presence. Someone who walks into a room with shoulders squared and a booming laugh gets noticed. Someone who slips in quietly, scanning the room first, doesn't. But think about it. Who's really gathering more information in those first few moments? The one charging in or the one observing? Observation rarely gets the applause, but it often holds the deeper truth. Now, don't get me wrong. Extroverts aren't villains here. Many of them are authentic, inspiring, genuinely energizing to be around. But when society builds its systems, its schools, its hiring practices, its social hierarchies on rewarding loudness above all, it skews the scale. It doesn't just lift extroverts up, it quietly pushes introverts down. And that's the part we rarely say out loud. As you drift through this thought, notice how your body responds. Maybe you feel a pang of recognition, remembering times when you were overlooked simply because you weren't quick to raise your hand. Maybe you feel a small rush of relief, realizing it wasn't about your worth, it was about a world tilted toward loudness. And maybe, just maybe, you feel a spark of rebellion. Because once you name the Loudness Premium, you can start seeing through it. You can recognize when volume masquerades as vision, and you can decide not to buy into that economy anymore. That shift in energy leads us into something else. If society keeps mislabeling volume as value, then what happens to the quiet strength sitting just beyond the spotlight? You know that feeling when someone mistakes your quiet for disinterest? It's almost laughable, because inside your head there's a full orchestra tuning up. But from the outside, all anyone sees is someone who isn't rushing to fill the silence. This is where society trips over its own assumptions. The world has been trained to believe that strength has to look like action, like constant motion, like words spilling out before the thought is fully baked. But your quiet strength? It gets misread, misnamed, mislabeled as weakness, shyness, even arrogance. It starts early, doesn't it? As a kid, you might have heard the words "speak up, don't be shy." Teachers, relatives, even well-meaning friends seem to think volume equals confidence and silence equals lack. They don't realize that sometimes you're silent because you're listening, really listening, not just waiting for your turn to speak. That's the kind of listening that remembers what people said months ago, the kind that notices the hesitation in someone's voice, the kind that could probably save a friendship before it even cracks. But because it doesn't sparkle in the spotlight, society misses it. There's an irony here. In psychology, we know that introversion isn't about fear, it's about energy. You recharge in solitude, not in crowds. But to the untrained eye, that preference for quiet space looks suspicious. Are you upset? People ask. Are you okay? And you want to laugh, because you've never been more okay than when you're curled up with your thoughts, letting them bloom without interruption. Still, the cultural story paints it as withdrawal, as if solitude must equal loneliness. Let's poke fun at this for a moment, because if solitude really meant you were broken, monks would be the most dysfunctional people on earth. And yet they're often the wisest. It's society's lens that's warped, not your wiring. But here's where the misread bites harder in professional life. Picture this, you're in a brainstorming session. The extroverts throw out idea after idea, like confetti at a parade. Some ideas sparkle, some don't, but the energy fills the room. You, meanwhile, are piecing together patterns, connecting threads, waiting until you have something solid. But by the time you're ready to share, the conversation has darted 6 steps ahead. And when you finally speak, people nod politely before leaping back to the buzz. Later, someone might even wonder why you didn't contribute much. The depth of your thought is invisible because it doesn't fit the tempo of extrovert performance. That invisibility shapes how people perceive you. Quiet becomes unambitious. Pauses become insecure. Reflectiveness becomes aloof. And each mislabel chips away, not at your worth, but at how the world records your presence. It's like you've been handing society handwritten letters of insight, but because you didn't spray them with glitter, they end up unopened. And yet, here's the paradox again. When things fall apart, when crises hit, who do people turn to? Often it's the steady, composed, reflective introverts who hold the space, who see clearly through the noise, who anchor the storm. That's the silent strength that society overlooks until it desperately needs it. It's like the quiet friend who rarely talks at the party but becomes everyone's lifeline at 2 a.m. when the tears start flowing. Now, let's tease out another layer. Society isn't deliberately cruel here, it's patterned. Loudness is easy to measure, silence is not. You can count words per minute, but how do you count thought per pause? And because we humans love metrics, we cling to what we can tally. Who raised their hand? Who spoke the most? Who appeared engaged? But depth doesn't tally well. It lingers. It accumulates. It shows up later, often after the crowd has gone home. Still, living in a world that misreads you can be exhausting. You learn to mask, to push yourself into extrovert mode when the situation demands it. You laugh louder than you feel. You nod more often. You practice active participation even when your brain is 10 steps ahead. You become bilingual in temperaments, fluent in extrovert performance, fluent in introvert truth. It's a survival skill, but it can leave you tired in ways no nap can fix. And here's the kicker. You probably don't even realize how much energy that costs you until you retreat back into your sanctuary. The moment you close the door, the moment you slip into silence, you feel the drain. That deep exhale you didn't know you were holding finally escapes. And in that quiet, your real strength, the one that never needed a spotlight, unfolds. Think about how many inventions, works of art, or revolutions started in silence. They didn't burst into the world with confetti. They germinated in long hours of thought and notebooks and solitary walks. But history books still tend to highlight the speeches, the rallies, the loud moments. The silent groundwork, the invisible patience, gets left in the margins. That's how the misread becomes not just personal, but cultural. Of course, we need both, noise and quiet, speed and depth, energy and pause. But society has a habit of stacking the deck in favor of the visible, the quick, the loud. And you, sitting there with your quiet strength, often end up underestimated until your contribution becomes undeniable. So the next time someone looks at you and assumes silence means weakness, remember this. Their lens is faulty. They're misinterpreting depth as absence. They're mistaking patience for passivity. And while it's tempting to internalize those labels, don't. Because your silence isn't emptiness, it's a reservoir. When the world runs dry of shallow noise, it's reservoirs like yours that save it. As your mind drifts deeper into this truth, notice how it shifts the story. If society is misreading strength as weakness, then the real question is, where did it learn that script in the first place? You can almost trace it like a thread running through childhood classrooms, high school hallways, office cubicles, and glossy magazine covers. This thread, woven into culture itself, forms what you might call echo chambers of extroversion. Everywhere you look, the systems we build seem to cheer on those who are fast, loud, and outward-facing, while the slower, quieter, inward-facing ways of being get politely ignored. It's not malice, it's conditioning. Still, it leaves a mark. Think back to school. Remember how participation points were counted? If you raised your hand often, you earned the gold stars. If you didn't, even if you aced the exam, there was always that comment scribbled in red ink, needs to participate more. And what does that really mean? It means society equated speaking out with learning, as though reflection happening quietly in your mind didn't count until it was broadcast. Nobody told you that the stillness in your brain was just as powerful, maybe more so, than the chatter in the air. The echo chamber grew louder in group projects. You've been there. 3 voices dominate, one takes the marker, the others nod along. If you pause to consider, to sketch ideas in the margin, it's seen as detachment. Yet ironically, when the project grade comes in, it's often the quieter mind who held the real framework together. But the teacher or professor still remembers the kids who filled the air with words. Visibility trumped depth again. And then there's media, the stories we consume. Movies and TV shows glorify the life of the party character, the charismatic leader, the magnetic friend who lights up every room. Quiet characters? They're sidekicks, comic relief, or worse, the mysterious loner trope. They rarely get to be complex humans with steady strength. Even children's cartoons often preach that being outgoing is the moral, while solitude is framed as overcoming shyness. From age 5 onward, the story is written. Be loud, be seen, be celebrated. Let's not skip over workplaces, though. The corporate world built its own echo chambers with architecture and ritual. Open plan offices, those bright, buzzing, desk-filled warehouses of chatter, were designed under the assumption that collaboration equals innovation. But what they really amplify is noise, distraction, and surface-level chatter. The loudest workers get noticed by managers walking the floor, while the quiet ones doing deep work blend into the hum. Brainstorming sessions follow the same script. Fast ideas earn sticky notes on the wall. The careful, quiet analysis comes too late to fit the schedule. The process itself is skewed toward extrovert styles. And here's a funny little aside. You know how in sitcoms the laugh track cues you when something's supposed to be funny? That's exactly how culture works in real life. Schools, offices, and media cue you on what's valuable. If you're loud, the laugh track goes off. If you're quiet, the silence feels like failure. Society becomes one giant laugh track for extroversion, and you can't help but notice it. Even religion and community spaces reflect this. In some traditions, sermons, testimonies, and public prayers are elevated over the silent practices of meditation or contemplation. The group-oriented activities are visible, the personal, inward ones are less celebrated. And while many faiths honor silence, the public image still tilts toward collective voice. It's another subtle reinforcement. Presence is proved by participation. But let's be real, it's not all a conspiracy against introverts. Cultures evolve based on survival needs. In early human tribes, quick communication was vital. Loud voices rallied groups, warned of danger, coordinated hunts. Societies built around agriculture and trade rewarded bargaining, public exchange, leadership in groups. Over time, the extrovert's toolkit got baked into cultural norms, while the introvert's toolkit, observation, patience, solitary innovation, stayed more hidden. And when industrialization and consumer culture hit, the demand for salesmanship, networking, and showmanship only multiplied. You're living in the aftermath of centuries of conditioning. But here's the rub. Echo chambers don't just amplify extroverts, they muffle introverts. It's not that your voice isn't there, it's that the walls bounce back the sound society prefers. That constant reinforcement changes how people are evaluated, promoted, and even loved. It creates a feedback loop. Extrovert traits get rewarded, so people exaggerate them. Introvert traits go unnoticed, so people suppress them. And over time, you end up with cultures that feel lopsided. Let's lighten this with a joke. If society were a karaoke night, extroverts would be the ones belting Bohemian Rhapsody into the mic, while introverts quietly write original songs in the corner. Guess which one makes the room cheer louder? But guess which one you'll still be humming years later? Both matter. One just gets more applause in the moment. The tricky part is, you've probably internalized these chambers without realizing it. Maybe you've judged yourself harshly for not being more outgoing. Maybe you've pushed yourself to attend events you didn't enjoy just to fit the narrative. Maybe you've even mistaken your own silence for lack of worth. That's the deepest effect of echo chambers. They don't just broadcast a message, they get you to echo it inside your own mind. So you pause now and ask, what would it feel like if schools celebrated deep listening as much as quick answers? If workplaces measured the quality of ideas over the volume of contributions? If movies gave the quiet character the lead role, not as a quirky twist, but as recognition of truth? Imagine how differently you'd see yourself in that mirror. As your mind drifts through these possibilities, you can sense the next layer opening. If echo chambers reinforce extroverts, what happens when attention itself becomes a kind of currency? When charisma doesn't just get applause, but tangible rewards? You've probably noticed how modern life runs on attention, like a car runs on fuel. Whoever captures the most eyes, ears, and clicks seems to hold the most power. And in this economy of spotlight, charisma is the ultimate currency. It doesn't matter whether the product is good, the idea is sound, or the plan is sustainable. What matters is whether someone can sell it with enough energy to make you believe. That's the spotlight economy, and extroverts have been cast as its natural shareholders. Picture this: you're at a networking event. The room hums with voices, handshakes, and business cards being swapped like trading cards. You're nursing a drink, observing, mapping out conversations like a strategist. Meanwhile, someone else has already charmed 3 circles of people with big laughs and bigger gestures. By the end of the night, they're remembered, even if they said nothing particularly groundbreaking. That's the unspoken rule. Visibility equals value. They have deeper insights, but if they never hit the airwaves, they're invisible currency. The spotlight economy runs on speed too. Social media rewards immediacy. Post fast, react faster, stay visible. An extroverted temperament slips easily into this rhythm, sharing pieces of daily life with a kind of casual confidence. For introverts, the thought of constant exposure can feel like being asked to live inside a glass house, with neighbors pressed up against the window 24/7. The pressure to perform in that environment doesn't just exhaust you, it subtly rewrites what society calls success. Here's the twist, though. Attention is addictive. Neuroscience shows that dopamine spikes when you're noticed, liked, followed, or applauded. Extroverts, wired to seek stimulation, thrive in this constant hit of social recognition. Introverts, wired for depth, often prefer fewer but richer interactions. But the spotlight economy doesn't pay in richness, it pays in clicks and claps. And so once again, extrovert energy gets bankrolled. You've seen this in politics, haven't you? Leaders who speak loudly, boldly, sometimes recklessly, tend to dominate headlines. Their words may be empty calories, but they fill the space. Meanwhile, the thoughtful, measured leaders, those who pause, weigh, and deliver nuance, get branded as boring, uninspiring, forgettable. The spotlight punishes complexity because complexity doesn't fit into a soundbite. And in a culture that equates visibility with viability, nuance gets bulldozed. The same dynamic shows up in the entertainment industry. Talk show guests who tell the loudest, funniest stories go viral. Musicians who dance as hard as they sing climb the charts faster. Writers? Well, writers usually need their extrovert counterparts, the charismatic spokesperson, the influencer, to champion their work aloud. It's not fair, but it's baked into how visibility translates into opportunity. Let's laugh about it for a moment, because otherwise it stings too much. If success really came down to who shouted the loudest, seagulls would run Fortune 500 companies by now. But alas, humans are more subtle than seagulls, or at least we like to think so. The real cost of the spotlight economy is not just who gets rewarded, but who gets overlooked. Introverts may hold back, refining their thoughts until they're sharp as diamonds, but by the time they speak, the conversation has already crowned a winner. The opportunity window closes not because the idea lacked merit, but because the spotlight had already moved on. And if this happens repeatedly, it reshapes entire careers. Promotions, partnerships, recognition, all tilt toward the ones who shine brightly and immediately. Now, don't misunderstand. Extroverts don't wake up scheming to monopolize the spotlight. Many simply thrive in it, and that thriving is contagious. They energize rooms, lift moods, and make people feel seen. That's a gift. But when society monetizes that gift as the only valuable currency, it creates imbalance. Suddenly, worth is judged not by contribution, but by performance. Not by how well you solved the problem, but how enthusiastically you presented the solution. And here's where it gets existential. The spotlight economy makes us all performers, even those of us who never auditioned. You learn to angle your personality toward visibility, whether it feels authentic or not. You post updates, you network, you rehearse enthusiasm in front of mirrors. You adapt, but adaptation costs energy, and introverts pay a higher tax. That exhaustion you feel after a conference or a party? That's not weakness. That's the tax of participating in an economy not designed with your wiring in mind. But notice this too. The spotlight, for all its glare, is fleeting. Today's viral star is tomorrow's forgotten name. Extroverts may rise quickly in this economy, but even they feel the churn. Introverts, by contrast, build differently. They invest in depth, in one-on-one relationships, in ideas that last. They may not reap immediate applause, but their work often endures. The irony is that when you zoom out over decades, introverted contributions quietly anchor the very structures extroverts dance upon. And maybe that's the secret nobody tells you. The spotlight economy rewards the quick spark, but society itself runs on the slow burn. The extrovert gathers attention, The introvert sustains meaning. Both roles matter, but one gets trophies while the other holds the foundation. As you let this sink in, you feel another question tugging at you. If the spotlight economy rewards dopamine-chasing visibility, maybe the real difference lies not in social labels, but in the brain itself. What if extroverts and introverts are literally wired to experience the world differently? You've probably felt it before, that quiet suspicion that your brain doesn't run on the same operating system as the person across from you. They crave noise, you crave stillness, they light up in crowds, you feel your battery drain. And here's the thing, you're not imagining it. Extrovert and introvert brains are literally wired to chase different kinds of rewards, and that wiring shapes everything from how you spend a Friday night to how you process life's biggest choices. Let's start with dopamine, the brain's reward chemical. Extroverts have systems that are more sensitive to dopamine's thrill. When they engage in stimulating activities, parties, networking, even spontaneous karaoke, they get a rush that feels like plugging into an energy socket. Introverts, on the other hand, have a more balanced or sometimes even overstimulated response to dopamine. Too much stimulation doesn't feel like energy, it feels like overload. That's why for you, walking into a crowded room might feel less like a boost and more like someone turned the radio up to static on all channels. Now here's the sneaky part. Society tends to design itself around the dopamine-driven brain. Fast-paced environments, constant notifications, flashy advertising, it's all tailored to keep people chasing that next microburst of excitement. Extroverts lean into it naturally, while introverts often feel like unwilling participants in a game of who can run longest on caffeine and noise. It's not just dopamine, though. Another neurotransmitter, acetylcholine, plays a starring role for introverts. Unlike dopamine, acetylcholine rewards slower, deeper focus. It lights up when you're reading, reflecting, or fully immersed in a project without interruption. That sense of calm satisfaction you get while journaling or taking a quiet walk, that's your brain whispering, yes, this is home. Society rarely throws a parade for acetylcholine, though. It's subtle, internal, less photogenic than dopamine's fireworks. This difference explains so much of daily life. Extroverts can hop from conversation to conversation, each one giving them another little dopamine spark. Introverts, meanwhile, prefer a single, long conversation that goes deeper. To the extrovert, that looks like not keeping up. To the introvert, it's the only way the interaction feels real. Neither is wrong, it's just different wiring. Let's play with an image. Imagine brains as coffee machines. Extroverts are espresso machines, quick shots, strong and fast, perfect for social buzz. Introverts are slow brew French presses, rich, layered, requiring time and quiet. Society often applauds espresso for its energy, but when you really want depth of flavor, you reach for the French press. And yet, in workplaces and schools, the espresso vibe dominates. Quick answers, fast results, constant chatter. If you bring your French press to that party, people wonder why you're taking so long. Another layer here, brain pathways. Extroverts tend to process stimuli through shorter, faster neural routes, while introverts route signals through longer, more complex paths that pass through memory and planning centers. That means when you're asked a question, your brain automatically connects it to past experiences, deeper contexts, and broader frameworks. It takes longer, but the answer carries weight. Extroverts can fire off responses faster, which makes them look more confident. Again, society rewards the quick spark over the thoughtful ember. And yes, let's insert a little humor before this turns into a neuroscience lecture. If brains really ran on operating systems, extroverts would be iPhones, sleek, fast, flashy, while introverts would be Linux, quietly powerful, endlessly customizable, but not always advertised on billboards. Which one runs most of the world's servers? Hint, not the iPhone. Understanding the wiring also explains energy drain. Extroverts gain energy from external stimulation because their dopamine pathways thrive on it. Introverts expend energy in the same situation because their brains are busy filtering and processing every sound, every glance, every detail. That's why a party that exhilarates an extrovert can leave you needing 3 days of recovery. It's It's not antisocial behavior, it's biology. But here's the existential kicker. Society doesn't often slow down long enough to honor the acetylcholine way of life. It glorifies the dopamine chase, networking, socializing, hustle culture. Quiet joy gets mistaken for laziness. Reflection gets mistaken for indecision. A long, thoughtful pause in conversation gets mistaken for awkwardness, all because society is tuned to the faster channel. Still, notice what happens when the dopamine party ends. Extroverts may crave the next big thing, but introverts, anchored in acetylcholine's calm, often build longer-lasting satisfaction. That's why introverts are more likely to nurture hobbies, long-term projects, and deep relationships that endure beyond the spotlight. While the world applauds the fireworks, you're quietly tending the fireplace that keeps burning through the night. Of course, both temperaments need each other. Extroverts remind us of vitality, spontaneity, and courage. Introverts remind us of patience, depth, and vision. But when one wiring is consistently glorified as the ideal, the other gets overlooked, misunderstood, even pathologized. People start asking you why you're so quiet, instead of asking what you're noticing, what you're building, what you're thinking. And maybe that's the point to carry forward. Your wiring isn't wrong. It's not a defect to prefer depth over dazzle, stillness over spotlight, French press over espresso. It's just different circuitry, and society has been biased toward one current for too long. As your mind lingers here, notice how this wiring difference ripples out into culture. If brains crave different kinds of stimulation, then even our rituals, like parties, gatherings, and celebrations, end up glorifying one way of being. Which leads us naturally into the illusion society loves most, the party. You've been there. The music thumping, the chatter blending into a low roar, someone shouting over the din. Isn't this fun? And maybe part of you nods because you don't want to be the odd one out. But another part of you is already scanning for the nearest exit, wondering how long you need to stay before it's polite to leave. This is the party illusion, the cultural stage where society glorifies performance over presence, noise over nuance, and extroversion over introversion. The setup is simple. Gatherings are designed like theaters. Bright lights, loud music, bodies packed close, every detail crafted to amplify stimulation. Extroverts thrive here, soaking in dopamine like solar panels under the sun. They shine brighter, laugh louder, and the crowd reflects that energy back to them. The illusion is that everyone must feel this surge, but you know better. For you, the same energy that electrifies them feels like a battery slowly draining. The tricky part is the script society hands you. If you're not laughing, mingling, or raising your glass on cue, you risk being read as antisocial, unfriendly, or worst of all, boring. The illusion demands participation. Opting out isn't framed as choice, it's framed as failure. And so you adapt. You put on a social mask, smile wider than you feel, and nod through small talk about weather, traffic, or someone's new blender. Meanwhile, your mind quietly yearns for one real conversation tucked in the corner. But here's the paradox. Those small, tucked-away conversations are often the best part of the night. You've probably had it happen. Amidst the chaos, you find one person, step outside, and suddenly the air is cooler, the noise dimmer. You talk about real things, fears, dreams, the strange ache of being alive, and for a moment, the illusion drops. The party becomes human again. That's the introvert gift, cutting through performance to find presence. But culture rarely notices that part. It notices the dance floor, not the back porch. Now, let's poke fun at this, because the illusion can be absurd. Who decided it was fun to yell, "So what do you do?" at someone you just met 5 times, because neither of you can hear over the DJ? If shouting biographies over a bass line is the gold standard of social connection, dolphins must be the most connected species alive. The party illusion runs deeper than literal parties, though. It's embedded in how society defines celebration. Weddings, graduations, promotions, all framed with big gatherings, loud music, clinking glasses. To choose a smaller, quieter form of joy, say dinner with 2 close friends, often feels like breaking an unspoken rule. You're supposed to celebrate loudly, or else it doesn't count. That's the cultural equation. Visibility equals joy. silence equals absence. The illusion also feeds the myth of popularity. At parties, the one surrounded by people is assumed to be fulfilled, admired, successful. But you know the truth, popularity doesn't guarantee intimacy. You can stand in a crowded room and still feel lonelier than you ever did alone in your bedroom. Extroverts may gather more acquaintances in those spaces, but introverts often crave fewer, deeper bonds. Yet society holds up the image of the center of attention partygoer as the ultimate proof of a good life. And here's the catch. Sometimes you internalize that image. You push yourself into more parties than you want, fearing you'll miss out if you stay home. But afterward, instead of feeling alive, you feel depleted, replaying small interactions and wishing you'd spent the time differently. The illusion tricks you into believing stimulation equals fulfillment. But as your own experience shows, fulfillment often looks quieter, slower, less flashy. Let's bring humor back in, because otherwise this might sound too heavy. If fun were truly measured by decibel levels, construction workers with jackhammers would be having the best time of anyone. Clearly, that's not the case. So why does society cling to the party illusion? Because it's easy to measure. Loud gatherings look like success. Big crowds look like belonging. High energy looks like happiness. It's quantifiable, photogenic, and Instagrammable. A quiet evening of reading or an unhurried walk with a close friend doesn't post as well. The illusion survives because it photographs better than the truth. But illusions eventually crack. You see it in people who chase party after party, yet confess to feeling empty. You hear it in friends who admit they're tired of networking events, but afraid to stop going. You notice it in yourself when you start longing for authenticity more than applause. That's the quiet rebellion, realizing presence beats performance, even if presence doesn't trend. And maybe that's the role introverts play in the larger story. Not to reject parties altogether, you can enjoy them on your terms, but to remind the culture that depth matters. That a whisper can sometimes outlast a shout. That connection doesn't need a crowd, it needs attention. As your thoughts linger here, you start to see the pattern extending beyond living rooms and dance floors. If parties glorify performance over presence, what about workplaces? Don't they too become stages where extroverts are spotlighted and introverts fade into the wings? Picture yourself stepping into an office on a Monday morning. The hum of chatter rises before the coffee even kicks in, keyboards clack in rhythm, and the open floor plan ensures that every word, laugh, and ringing phone seeps straight into your brain. Welcome to the modern workplace stage, a theater built with extroverts in mind, where visibility is currency, noise is productivity, and quiet reflection is often mistaken for idleness. It wasn't always like this. Work once meant cubicles, closed doors, or even solitary craftsmanship, spaces where deep focus was possible. But somewhere along the way, companies decided that tearing down walls would spark collaboration, and that collaboration would lead to innovation. The open office was born, and with it came a silent hierarchy. Those who thrive in constant buzz rise faster, while those who crave quiet retreat feel like misfits. The stage lights are always on, and you're expected to perform. Brainstorming sessions are the best example. You've probably sat in one, markers squeaking across a whiteboard, extroverts tossing out ideas like confetti. The energy feels exciting, but scratch beneath the surface, and most of those ideas vanish after the meeting. The quick thinkers shine because their timing matches the format, but the deep thinkers, those who need a pause to process, are left with their brilliance unsaid. By the time your fully formed idea crystallizes, the conversation has moved on. Once again, the illusion of participation wins over the reality of substance. And then come the meetings. Endless meetings. Studies even show that people who speak more in meetings are perceived as more competent, regardless of whether their contributions have actual value. You've seen it happen. The person who dominates the room gets nods, promotions, leadership potential stamped on their record. Meanwhile, the quiet observer who synthesizes the discussion into a clear, actionable plan afterward gets a polite thank you email, but not the recognition. The workplace spotlight rarely shines on the ones sitting in the back row, even if they're steering the whole production. Now, add humor, because otherwise this sounds like office purgatory. If talking in meetings were the sole measure of intelligence, parrots would be running Fortune 500 companies by now. But alas, it's not that simple. Performance culture also seeps into casual office rituals. Team building events often revolve around extrovert-friendly activities, karaoke nights, happy hours, scavenger hunts, ropes courses. You're told it's about bonding, but really, it's about showcasing energy. If you don't match the enthusiasm, you risk looking disengaged. And yet, introverts often bond better through shared projects, meaningful one-on-one conversations, or even silence that feels comfortable. None of those options photograph well for the company newsletter, though, so they rarely get celebrated. Even workspaces themselves betray the bias. Open plans strip away privacy in the name of collaboration, but what they really do is privilege extroverts who feed on the buzz. For introverts, the lack of walls means constant interruptions, constant exposure, and constant energy drain. You end up staying late just to get an hour of quiet focus after everyone else leaves. Your most productive time becomes invisible because it happens off stage after the performance has ended. And let's not forget promotions. Extroverts often network effortlessly, chatting with managers, making themselves memorable. Introverts may prefer to let their work speak for itself, but in a world where self-promotion is framed as ambition, silence can look like stagnation. The irony? Many companies say they want thoughtful leaders, yet their systems reward the loudest candidate in the room. It's not a conspiracy, it's the workplace stage doing what it was built to do, spotlighting charisma. But here's where you pause, because the story isn't hopeless. Some workplaces are slowly waking up. Remote work gave introverts a reprieve, letting substance take precedence over performance for a while. Deep work is becoming a buzzword, even among extroverts who secretly crave it. And more leaders are starting to recognize that a balanced team needs both the spark of extroverts and the anchor of introverts. Still, until that balance is the norm, you live in a system tilted toward those who thrive under stage lights. That doesn't mean you can't succeed. It just means your success often comes with an extra layer of energy tax. You're performing in a play where the script wasn't written for you, and that's exhausting. But when the spotlight inevitably fades and quick talkers run out of substance, it's often the quiet thinkers who step in with real solutions. You've seen it happen. The loudest person drives a project forward quickly, but when cracks appear, everyone turns to the quiet one who'd been tracking the risks all along. That's the paradox of the workplace stage. Extroverts may shine under the lights, but introverts often hold the scaffolding that keeps the set from collapsing. One is noticed immediately, the other is remembered eventually. Both matter, but only one is consistently glorified. And as you let that sink in, you realize something. The workplace isn't the only stage where this myth plays out. Friendships, too, get tangled in the same illusion that popularity, visibility, and sheer numbers of connections are proof of fulfillment. But what happens when that myth starts to unravel? You've probably heard it 1,000 times. They have so many friends, they must be so happy. It's a tidy little cultural myth that popularity equals fulfillment, that the size of your social circle is proof of how loved and successful you are. But if you've ever stood in a crowded room surrounded by familiar faces and still felt utterly alone, you already know how flimsy that myth is. Fulfillment isn't about numbers, it's about depth. And that's where society again leans toward extroverts while overlooking introverts. Think back to high school. Popularity was the golden ticket, wasn't it? The ones who filled yearbook pages with smiling group shots were crowned as winners of adolescence. The quieter kids, the ones reading under a tree or sketching in notebooks or talking with one close friend instead of many, were background characters in the cultural script. The assumption was that more attention meant more belonging. Nobody stopped to ask if those crowded friendships were nourishing or just convenient. Fast forward to adulthood, and the myth just grows up. Social media makes it visible, countable. Followers, likes, connections. Extroverts often thrive in this space, curating stories and posts that draw engagement. Introverts may post less, preferring to share life's moments selectively. To the outside world, the extrovert looks socially rich, while the introvert looks scarce. But those numbers don't measure intimacy. 1,000 likes can't compete with one friend who shows up when your world falls apart. Here's the irony. Introverts with fewer but closer bonds often report deeper satisfaction in their friendships. They'd rather invest in a handful of relationships that can withstand silence, conflict, and time than scatter energy across dozens of casual acquaintances. But because society values visibility, that richness gets overlooked. It's like comparing a sprawling buffet of fast food to a single home-cooked meal. One photographs better, but the other truly nourishes. Now let's laugh a little, because otherwise this gets too heavy. If friendship were really about how many people you could gather around you, then wedding crashers, those random extras at someone else's party, would be the happiest people alive. But we both know that's not the case. The friendship myth also creates pressure. You've probably felt it, that nagging sense that you should be going out more, meeting more people, expanding your circle. And when you don't, you wonder if something's wrong with you. But pause for a second. When has should ever been the language of real joy? Your happiest moments probably came not from checking boxes, but from being fully present with someone who understands you. Maybe it was a late night talk, a quiet road trip, or just sitting in silence while the world spun on. That's fulfillment, not the head count of who knows your name. Still, the myth is sticky. Companies sell products by showing groups of laughing friends. Magazines feature influencers surrounded by admirers. Even family gatherings sometimes carry the subtext that more equals better. And when you don't match that picture, you risk feeling inadequate, even if your quieter, steadier relationships are healthier. The myth doesn't just distort how others see you, it can distort how you see yourself. But here's the truth you can't unsee once it clicks. Popularity is often a performance. It thrives on constant upkeep, calls, texts, parties, appearances. It looks shiny but can be fragile underneath. Real friendship doesn't need that performance. It survives absence, adapts to change, and deepens with time. Introverts often excel at this kind of bond because they're wired to seek quality over quantity. They notice small details, remember unspoken words, and show up in ways that don't need applause. And maybe that's why, when crises hit, people so often turn to their quieter friends. The extroverted crowd may be wonderful for celebration, but the introverted presence, steady, calm, listening, becomes the anchor when life tilts. Fulfillment hides in those invisible gestures. The text at midnight, the meal dropped at your door, the silence held without judgment. Those don't show up in yearbooks or Instagram feeds, but they matter more than any metric society glorifies. So the myth starts to crumble when you ask, would you rather be known by everyone or truly understood by a few? The extrovert often leans toward the first, the introvert toward the second. Both have value, but only one is consistently glorified. And until society learns to celebrate depth alongside breadth, introverts will keep quietly holding a kind of wealth that doesn't shine under stage lights, but lasts far longer. As you let that truth settle, notice the shift. If popularity isn't proof of fulfillment, maybe it's time to flip the script. Maybe the very traits introverts are often overlooked for, patience, empathy, focus, and depth, aren't weaknesses at all. Maybe they're superpowers society needs more than it realizes. Here's where the story turns, the part you've probably been waiting for without even realizing it. After wandering through all the ways society misreads you, overlooks you, or nudges you towards someone else's script, it's time to flip the perspective. Because the very qualities that culture downplays in introverts often turn out to be quiet superpowers, shaping lives and futures in ways the spotlight can't measure. Start with patience. You know how the world glorifies hustle, speed, instant responses? That constant race leaves little room for reflection. But your patience, your natural tendency to wait, to watch, to let things unfold, often saves you from rushing into mistakes. In a meeting, you might hold back, observe the currents, and only speak when you have something solid. To others, that looks like slowness. In reality, it's wisdom. Patience lets you see not just the first move, but the ripple effects several steps down the line. In a culture of impulsiveness, patience is almost a superhuman trait. Then there's empathy. Because you listen deeply, you pick up on subtleties others miss, the pause in a sentence, the way someone avoids eye contact, the hesitation in their laugh. You feel the texture of people's emotions, not just their words. This makes you the kind of friend, partner, or leader who doesn't just respond, but understands. Extroverts often shine in making people feel seen publicly, but introverts excel at making people feel known privately. And in a world full of noise, being truly known is rare magic. Focus is another gift. While extroverts juggle multiple conversations and projects, you can immerse yourself in one thing with remarkable depth. That's why so many scientists, artists, and thinkers, people who gave us breakthroughs, leaned introvert. They had the ability to block out the clamor and go inward, mining layers of thought others never reach. Society may overlook the quiet worker in the corner, but history is full of revolutions born from that corner. And here's a bit of humor to lighten the weight. If multitasking were really the ultimate skill, octopuses with all those arms would be running tech startups. But notice, most breakthroughs still come from humans sitting quietly in a room, focusing on one question at a time. Another overlooked superpower, resilience in solitude. Extroverts often need external validation to feel grounded. Introverts can draw strength from within. That doesn't mean you don't crave connection. You do, just in smaller, more meaningful doses. But when the noise fades, you don't collapse. You thrive. You write, create, reflect, recharge. Solitude isn't loneliness, it's fuel. And while society sometimes paints being alone as tragic, it can actually be one of your richest resources. Your ability to listen also deserves recognition. In conversations, introverts aren't just waiting for their turn to talk. They're absorbing, processing, reflecting. That makes your words, when they come, carry weight. Think of the moments when someone suddenly turns to you after everyone else has spoken, because they realize you've been paying attention the whole time. In those moments, your quiet presence shifts from background to anchor. But perhaps your greatest superpower is perspective. Because you live slightly outside the roar of the crowd, you can see it more clearly. You notice patterns, hypocrisies, ironies. You sense when performance is hollow. That distance gives you clarity others miss, and clarity is what guides real change. Extroverts may drive the car faster, but introverts often hold the map. Now here's the paradox again. These superpowers aren't flashy. They don't win applause at the party, or dominate brainstorming sessions, or trend on social media. They're quieter, subtler, almost invisible in the moment. But when the noise fades, and when society faces real challenges, these are the gifts it leans on. Patience, empathy, focus, resilience, perspective. These are the qualities that build bridges, mend fractures, and create futures worth living. So why are they undervalued? Because we're conditioned to look for sparks, not slow burns. Sparks dazzle, slow burns sustain. But once you recognize your strengths for what they are, you stop trying to trade them for someone else's fireworks. You start seeing the worth in your way of being. And that shift isn't just personal, it ripples outward. Imagine workplaces that honor deep work, schools that celebrate quiet reflection, communities that value listening as much as speaking. Imagine friendships where presence counts more than popularity. That's not a utopian dream. It's the balance that becomes possible when introverts stop apologizing for their wiring and start owning it as strength. As your mind lingers here, you sense the story drawing toward its resolution. We've traced the glorification of extroverts, the overlooking of introverts, the illusions and myths that feed it all. But the final step is envisioning something beyond the binary, a culture not tilted one way, but balanced. A stage where both loud voices and quiet truths have equal space. So here you are, standing at the edge of everything we've unpacked. The noise, the myths, the stages designed for extroverts, the quiet gifts introverts hold close. The question lingers, what would it look like if society stopped glorifying one temperament over the other and instead chose balance? Imagine a culture where both extroverts and introverts share the stage, not as rivals, but as partners in a fuller human story. You can almost see it. Workplaces redesigned with options, buzzing hubs for collaboration when ideas need bouncing, and private alcoves for focus when depth is required. Schools that don't just reward hand raisers with gold stars, but also honor the student who listens deeply and returns the next day with a question that shifts the whole discussion. Celebrations shaped not just around volume and spectacle, but also around intimacy and stillness. Extroverts dancing under lights, introverts gathering in quiet corners, and both experiences valued as real joy. This balance doesn't erase differences, it amplifies them in harmony. Extroverts bring energy, spark, the power to ignite. Introverts bring patience, grounding, the power to sustain. One is a sunrise that jolts you awake, the other a steady candle that keeps you warm through the night. Society needs both. You need both. Because within you, even if you lean introvert or extrovert, there are echoes of the other side. Balance begins not just out there, but inside. Now, let's laugh a little before we drift too far into the philosophical. If balance really were about extremes, then a seesaw would be the most enlightened piece of playground equipment. But you know it's not about extremes, it's about flow. And here's the hopeful part. Change is already happening. Remote work opened doors for introverts to shine. Awareness around mental health has nudged people toward valuing rest, reflection, and authenticity. Even cultural icons are beginning to admit that constant performance is unsustainable. The pendulum may swing slowly, but it's swinging. And with every shift, the possibility of a culture that embraces both temperaments grows more real. For you, the invitation is simple. Stop treating your quiet as a deficit. Start seeing it as contribution. When you listen instead of speaking, you're shaping the conversation. When you choose depth over breadth, you're building connections that last. When you step back from noise, you're preserving energy for what truly matters. You're not missing out, you're tuning in differently. And when extroverts share their spark, you can meet it not with envy, but with gratitude. Knowing your steady flame adds something just as vital. Because the truth is, life isn't a contest between the loud and the quiet. It's a tapestry woven from both. The shouts and the whispers, the bursts and the pauses, the parties and the porch talks. Society may have leaned one way for too long, but balance is always waiting. And balance, once found, has a way of softening everything. So let your shoulders relax. Let the need to prove yourself fade, just a little. Let the story of introversion and extroversion settle not as rivalry, but as rhythm. You don't need to shout to be heard. You don't need to vanish to be at peace. You belong on the stage, even if your part is a quiet one, especially if your part is a quiet one. And now, as the narrative drifts to its close, let's ease into the wind, down. The room grows softer. The lights dim not into darkness, but into a glow that feels like dusk, warm and unhurried. You can feel your breath steadying, your body unclenching from the day's small battles. Society's noise may still hum in the distance, but here, in this pause, you're free from comparison, free from the tug of louder voices, free to be exactly as you are, quiet, thoughtful, steady. Picture yourself walking along a quiet street at night. Windows glow in scattered homes, but the air is hushed, the sky wide above you. Each step is unforced. Each breath comes easier. The myths and illusions we explored, the party noise, the workplace spotlight, the popularity contest, they all feel smaller now, like echoes from another room. What stays with you instead is the truth. That presence matters more than performance, that depth outweighs display, that balance is where peace lives. Let that truth wrap around you like a blanket. Let it remind you that your way of being, your rhythm, your silence, your careful noticing isn't just enough, it's essential. Society may glorify the loud, but the world also leans quietly on the steady. And as you drift toward rest, you can let go of the pressure to be anyone else. So here in this final moment, I'll whisper it one last time, you belong. In the noise, in the quiet, in the spaces in between, you belong.